This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for a deep dive that's both inspiring and kind of unsettling.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Today we're going to explore what it was like to be a Japanese American during World War II.
Really fascinating stuff.
We're using this great episode of the Mr. Hutchings History podcast called The Unseen Heroes, Japanese Americans in WWII.
Itchy title, right?
It really is. And it gets right at the heart of this story. Just imagine thousands of Japanese Americans fought for the U.S.
The very country that imprisoned them.
And their families. It's crazy.
It really is.
Like, talk about a conflict of loyalty.
For sure, for sure. And we're going to unpack some seriously incredible acts of courage.
I bet. I've heard so much about groups like the 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
Oh yeah, they were legendary.
And then there's the Military Intelligence Service.
The MIS. Really vital contributions, but their stories don't always get told.
Not enough recognition for sure. But before we get into all the heroics, like, what was it actually like for Japanese Americans even to enlist in the military?
Oh man, you're talking about a really tough situation.
Yeah.
Try to imagine trying to sign up when the government is basically like side-eyeing your every move.
Right.
At the very beginning of the war, the Navy just flat out said no to Japanese Americans.
Oh, wow.
No way, no how. And it took until like 1944 for the Army to finally fully let them in.
Jeez.
It was a long road, that's for sure.
And then on top of all that, there's Executive Order 9066.
Oof, don't even get me started.
Over 120,000 Japanese Americans were interned because of that.
Yeah, it's a dark chapter for sure.
It's kind of mind-blowing that after all that, so many still wanted to serve.
It really speaks to their resilience.
Right.
And, I mean, they must have been going through so many emotions.
Absolutely.
Trying to prove their loyalty, but also
fighting for a country that basically treated them like a threat.
it's wild.
Yeah.
Talk about a story filled with contradictions.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But let's get to, like, the heart of it. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
Yes. The 442nd, composed almost entirely of Nisei,
Nice.
second-generation Japanese Americans.
Gotcha.
And they quickly became one of the most decorated units in U.S. military history.
Really? Wow.
They had this motto, go for broke.
I've heard that.
It wasn't just some catchy phrase, though.
What do you mean?
Like, it really reflected their mentality, you know?
I'm not sure I follow.
Oh, think about it. These soldiers, many had families in internment camps, right?
Right.
There was huge pressure to prove themselves.
Yeah.
Go for broke was about risking everything
Wow.
for a country that treated them like second-class citizens.
That really adds a whole other meaning to what they did.
Oh, for sure.
It wasn't just bravery, it was about defying expectations and proving their worth.
Exactly. And their actions definitely spoke louder than words.
So what did people think?
Even President Roosevelt recognized their tenacity, called them outstanding for their bravery.
Wow. But I guess it was their actions in battle that really cemented their legacy, right?
Absolutely. Like the rescue of the lost battalion in France. Have you heard of that?
I have. I've heard it's an incredible story.
Oh, it is. The 442nd had to rescue this battalion of Texan soldiers trapped behind enemy lines.
Huh.
These Nisei soldiers just charged right into heavy fire.
Oh, jeez.
They had over 800 casualties in just 5 days.
That's insane.
They did end up rescuing the lost battalion, but at a massive cost.
It's hard to even fathom that level of sacrifice.
You're telling me?
Knowing their families were still being treated so unfairly back home.
It's just awful.
I think I read somewhere that they had one of the highest casualty rates of the entire war.
You'd be right. Over 9,500 Purple Hearts were awarded to the 442nd. Shows their incredible commitment, even when facing such adversity.
They didn't stop there, though, right?
Nope. They helped liberate the Dachau concentration camp, too.
No way.
Oh, yeah. And they were crucial in pushing into the Rhineland.
Wow.
Really helped the Allied advance. All in all, the 442nd earned 21 Medals of Honor, over 4,000 Bronze Stars, and 52 Distinguished Service Crosses.
I'm speechless. While their families were in prison, these soldiers are out there winning medals.
Crazy, right?
Proving their loyalty in the most extreme way possible.
It's such a powerful story. But there's another side to this, too.
What do you mean?
The Japanese Americans who served in less visible roles, like the Military Intelligence Service or MIS.
I'm curious to learn more about them. What can you tell us?
That's where we get into like the unsung heroes.
Oh,
While the 442nd was fighting on the front lines, the MIS was doing equally important work.
behind the scenes.
Exactly. Less publicized, but so crucial.
What were they doing?
Well, they were mostly Nisei and Kibei,
Kibei.
second-gen Japanese Americans born in the U.S., and those educated in Japan.
Got it.
They used their language skills to translate captured enemy documents, interrogate prisoners, intercept communications,
Wow.
especially vital in the Pacific theater.
Makes sense.
Understanding Japanese tactics was essential.
So they were like code breakers, intelligence
You
analysts.
got it. Operating in the shadows.
What kind of impact did their efforts actually have on the war, though?
Oh, it was massive. Some historians think the MIS might have shortened the war in the Pacific by 2 years.
Really? Wow.
That's huge. Really shows the power of intelligence gathering.
Did anyone ever, acknowledge their work?
General Douglas MacArthur himself, the supreme commander of Allied forces in the Pacific.
He knew about the MIS.
He even said the Nisei linguists saved countless American lives.
Incredible, working behind the scenes without much recognition.
Yeah. But speaking of unsung heroes, we can't forget about the Japanese American women who served.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I bet their stories don't get told enough.
Definitely not. They face huge challenges, too.
I can imagine.
Around 50 Japanese American women joined the Women's Army Corps.
The WWII, wait, only 50.
Yeah, it's a small number, especially considering the times.
True.
Back then, women's roles were pretty much confined to the home.
It must have taken a lot of courage to join the military then.
Oh, yeah. Especially with all the discrimination their community was facing.
What kind of roles did they fill in the WWII?
They did all sorts of things. Clerical work, communications, health care.
Sounds like important work.
It was. It might not have been as visible as the front lines, but they were critical.
For sure.
Like we have Hazel Yamashita. She worked as a telephone operator for the Signal Corps,
Wow.
keeping those vital communications flowing.
That sounds like a high-pressure job.
You bet. Especially during wartime.
Any other notable women who served?
Oh, yeah. There's Chiyoko Sato. She worked in a military hospital.
Taking care of wounded soldiers.
Exactly. These women weren't just fighting for their country. They were challenging norms, too.
They were fighting on multiple fronts.
And paving the way for future generations. Their contributions might not have made headlines
But they were just as vital.
as those on the battlefields.
Absolutely.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
What's that?
How the surface of all these Japanese Americans, both the ones on the front lines and those in intelligence roles,
Right.
how it actually helped change public opinion. And it even paved the way for the civil rights movement later on.
I can see that. After seeing their sacrifices, nobody could really deny their loyalty.
Exactly. Their actions just spoke volumes.
Well, louder than words, that's for sure. Especially back then with all the prejudice.
It was a different time. But their contributions really made it hard to justify the discrimination they'd faced.
They were proving themselves over and over again. Did all this lead to any, formal recognition for the Japanese American community?
It did, but it took a while, like decades.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until 1988 that President Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act.
What did that do?
It formally apologized for the internment and offered reparations to surviving internees.
It's never too late to try and right a wrong, I guess. But speaking of trying to understand history,
Yeah.
you mentioned before that historians have different perspectives on this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are at least 4 main schools of thought.
4. Okay, let's break those down.
Sounds good. Let's start with the Patriotic Revisionist School.
Oh, what's that all about?
They focus on the loyalty of the Nisei soldiers.
Especially the 442nd.
Exactly. They see their service as a way to prove their devotion to America.
Even with their families imprisoned.
Yeah. It's a narrative that really highlights their dedication despite facing injustice.
What about the other perspectives?
Well, there's the National Security School.
Okay.
They take a more government-centric view, you could say.
How so?
They argue that the internment and those initial restrictions on Japanese Americans serving,
Right.
they say it was all necessary.
Necessary.
Well, they say it was unfortunate, but
Yeah.
necessary because of the war.
I guess after Pearl Harbor, everyone was on edge.
Yeah, there was a lot of fear and paranoia going around.
So they're not saying the internment was right, just that it made sense at the time.
Pretty much. It's a more pragmatic view looking at things from the government side.
I bet that's a controversial take.
Oh, for sure. Especially for those who were actually interned.
What's the third school of thought then?
That would be the Civil Libertarian School. They have a much stronger stance against the internment.
Yeah, I can see that.
They see it as a straight-up violation of constitutional rights.
So they're really focusing on individual rights no matter what.
Exactly.
Right.
They argue that the government basically trampled on civil liberties.
And that the fear of espionage wasn't a good enough reason.
Right. They prioritize individual freedoms even during wartime.
It's interesting how these different groups interpret things so differently.
It is. Makes you realize there's rarely one simple answer when it comes to history.
What about the last perspective then?
That's the economic determinist school.
What do they focus on?
Economic factors. The role they played in both the internment and the military service.
You mean like there were financial motives behind it all?
Yeah, that's their main argument.
Mm-hmm.
They say the internment and the restrictions on Japanese-American businesses,
Huh?
it all benefited white competitors.
So they were trying to get rid of their rivals.
That's the idea. And then they say using Nisei soldiers in dangerous combat roles. That was a way to exploit them while their families were detained.
Wow, that's a pretty cynical view.
It is. But it highlights how racial prejudice and economic self-interest can intertwine.
It's amazing how four groups can see the same events in such different ways.
It really shows how important it is to consider multiple viewpoints when studying history.
We have to remember there's rarely one definitive answer.
Absolutely.
Mm.
We need to approach history with an open mind and be willing to look at things from different angles.
That way we can really get a better understanding of the past.
And see all the complexities and contradictions. Because the story of Japanese Americans in World War II,
Yeah.
it's not just about battles and politics.
It's about people.
Exactly. Thousands of people who went through unimaginable challenges.
And showed incredible courage and resilience.
Their stories make us ask some tough questions about loyalty, justice, what it means to be a citizen.
They challenge our assumptions and force us to face some uncomfortable truths
But they also teach us valuable lessons.
about the human spirit.
And the importance of fighting for what's right, even when things seem impossible.
It's just amazing to me that even with all that discrimination,
Yeah.
Japanese Americans still wanted to serve their country.
It's complicated, right? Like, what does patriotism even mean when you're being treated like that?
It really makes you think. I mean, here they are being labeled as the enemy,
Uh-huh.
but they're also proving their loyalty through their actions,
Fighting on the front lines.
working in intelligence.
They did it all. Really shows the resilience of the Japanese-American community.
Totally. It's inspiring.
Their story really highlights their dedication to America.
Despite all the obstacles.
I mean, think about the 442nd, the MIS, even those women in the WAC.
Yeah.
They all played a part in pushing for civil rights later on,
Their contributions were so important.
both during the war and after.
It's like they forced America to face its own hypocrisy.
How can you deny basic rights to people who are willing to die for their country?
Exactly. It's a story that we need to keep telling.
Absolutely. It's not just about the past, it's about understanding the present, too.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay, Kat.
How do you think all these experiences, the internment, the military service, the fight for equality,
Yeah.
how do you think all that shaped the Japanese American community in the years after the war?
It's a great question.
It's something to really ponder. Because if we want to create a more just world,
A better future for everyone.
we have to understand the past
Learn from it.
and never forget the stories of those who fought for a better tomorrow.
Well said. Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive,
It's been a pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.